My name is Nancy Jones, and I live at 1518 Oakwood Drive here in Albert Lea. And I guess I just have some concerns taking a look at our calendar. And I was on a committee in Austin, because I'm a teacher there, that did explore that option of whether or not we should change all of our buildings to the early start and going to a more of a 45-15 calendar. And after a lot of research and a lot of work done between community members and teachers and administrators and business leaders within the community, we didn't find in any of our research any areas where there were educational gains that were done by going to a 45-15 calendar, unfortunately. And even in our own district in Austin, where it's been said that, well, the Sumner building has had significant educational gains, I learned from Dewey Shara, one of the principals at Nevlin Elementary School, that there were actually two other elementary schools in that same time period in the Austin district that had more significant educational gains than the Sumner building. And the common thread for all of our elementaries had been that they had all, at the same time that Sumner changed their calendar, had switched both their reading and their math curriculums. And so I guess we have to sometimes take a look at how we're educating, not so much a calendar. And I also have concerns because of the fact that my own kids' MCA scores, both of them went down last spring. And we tried our best to make sure that they were ready, making sure that they got a good night's sleep, making sure that they ate breakfast and those types of things. And I think it probably had more to do with where spring break maybe fell on how it affected our kids this past year. I'm not sure on that. I mean, it's kind of hard to say, but in looking at our district results, my kids weren't alone in having their test scores go down, and that's a concern. And so, and I guess lastly I want to say too is, as a teacher and a coach, one of the things that I've always said is I've got to be able to, if I'm having an expectation of my students and my athletes, I need to have the expectation of myself. And we teach a lot about ethics. And I take a look at the fact that our calendar, we're switching it based on being able to get a waiver from the state for construction reasons. And I taught in the New Prague district when we built a new high school. And that was a reason to change our calendar that year. And we got out, started a week earlier one year and got out a week earlier the next spring, because we needed to move everything out of the current high school so they could renovate it into a middle school over the summer, and then move stuff from the high school into the new high school, which wasn't done, and so everything had to go on to semis. And so to me, that's what the letter and intent of the construction waivers. And so, and lastly, I guess I'd like to comment on that too. I mean, we put a brand new HVAC system in the Austin High School, and that's a pretty dang building. I mean, it's old, it had to be retrofitted, and we didn't use a construction waiver to do that. And so if we're gonna do things, let's make sure we're doing them ethically and for the right reasons. And I guess that's where I'm at, taking a look at it.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward at this time? Okay, we'll move on to the action items, or excuse me, approval of today's agenda. I'd entertain a motion. There is one change, though. The study session for the facilities feedback was not completed, so that would be stricken from the agenda. So other than that, is there a motion to approve?
Does that mean we're not going to have a recess?
We're still going to do that. Okay. No. Yes, we're still going to have the recess. Okay? Okay. The motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve tonight's agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Motion carries. Our action item then tonight is the school calendar. What are the thoughts of the board?
I have one question before we pursue that issue, and it's a procedural. I'm assuming that if we move to adopt one of these proposals and that motion fails, then we will entertain a motion to adopt the second one. Is that correct?
I think that would be correct. Our board would like to make a decision, yes. And did you have some input that you'd like to share? Okay. Okay. I didn't see their names on there, so I was, go ahead. Any comments or questions?
Sure. I just wanted to comment on the process we use, so the new board members kind of know how we approach that calendar, how these two calendars came to be. So we prepared at the district office 2 basic calendars, added items to them. We attended, or we, at the administrative cabinet, reviewed different dates, whether they be conferences or orientations, and added those to the calendars. Dr. Funk invited all the bargaining units to the meeting a week or 2 ago, and all attended, sent a representative except for the custodial bargaining unit. The teachers sent a elementary and a secondary representative. So at that meeting, we discussed an additional, and parents, additional items for both calendars. So I just wanted to get that out front, that that's the process. And then the second thing I'd like to add is some of the data that has been asked for from me, either at board meetings or different times. And last week, I sent the growth data to the board in my weekly report. And so one of the board goals is growth. And so as just want to take a quick look to, if you didn't get a chance to look at that growth data, it was on a hyperlink. But the statewide reading growth last year was up 0.8%, so that's grades 3 through 8 and 10. Albert Lea, as a school district, our growth in reading was up 2.8% across the district. So that's not necessarily proficient, but it is growth. So there's just one category of not proficient, and those are students who hit high growth but maybe still weren't proficient. So they jump more than a year. So they are the students who are considered on track. In the area of mathematics, as a statewide, across the state in math, we went down 0.9% across the state. And Albert Lea Public School District, we went up 1.4%. So those are data points that you asked for at the last board meeting, and I sent them to you last week. In addition, the question came up is, how did we make a jump? As you've seen data from all the school buildings. For me, from the secondary end, one of our most significant jumps was at Southwest Middle School, both in math and reading. So I was asked what that growth was. In mathematics, so this is both 6th and 7th grade, they grew by 13% last year from the previous year, and in reading, they grew 9.7% from the previous year. And I don't have all the ACT data disaggregated, but I do have some of the significant pieces. So the statewide composite score in 15-16 was 21.1, and then last year it was 21.5. So these are the 2 years where all juniors in the first year had to take it to graduate. Last year, all juniors had to be offered it on a school day. So those 2 numbers really compare the same offering of that test to statewide juniors. Albert Lea area schools in 15-16 were 19.6 and grew to 20.2. So whereas the state grew 0.4, Albert Lea area schools grew 0.6. The ACT is also broken down by benchmarks. So there are 4 parts to the test. And so ACT takes every school in the state as well as the state and said, if you're growing, how are you growing? So one of their statistics is, what's the percentage of students hitting all 4 benchmarks? As a state, and this is last year's data, compared to the previous years, we went from 29% of students hitting the benchmark, all 4 benchmarks, to 31%. And Albert Lea area schools went from 18% of students hitting all 4 benchmarks to 27%, so a 9% growth on the ACT of hitting those 4 benchmarks. Just a couple of other things that came up at the meeting was some of the days in blue are federal holidays, and some of those are in bargaining units as days off. So I know that was a question. And then somebody asked me about testing unique to second semester. So just a couple of pieces. This year, the ACT, and we don't choose this date, the ACT organization chooses the date. The last 2 years, it's been April 19th. This year, it's moving up to April 3rd, so 12 days, an increase. So for us, our kids, because they started pre-Labor Day, will be able to make up 8 of those days versus those post-Labor Day starts. 7% of our population takes the access test, which is for EL learners, and that test is given over multiple days, and for those students, it is in February. Again, we don't set the date. There's actually a national organization that sets it for all schools in the state of Minnesota called WIDA, and those students will probably lose 2 days of instruction if you're an EL student, and that's given K-12. So approximately 7% of our population takes that in February. They take a listening, a reading, a speaking, and a writing. And that also will become a part of our accountability testing moving into next year. All of our 3rd through 8th graders take math and reading, and cumulatively, probably a full day spread across multiple days for those tests. All of our 5th, 8th graders take the science test, again, another half day, and then 10th graders also take that science test. So those are just some notes unique to questions that people have asked me, and I think I've shared most of them either today or to you and the board in my weekly report.
And Kathy answered most of the questions from the last time we were here discussing the calendar. Just a couple other things that I want to point out is, don't know if you're aware or not, but the principals unanimously voted for the pre-Labor Day start, all of the principals in the district. Another thing, just from an elementary perspective, is, you know, the state of Minnesota gives us the date when MCA testing needs to be done for reading and math. I believe it's May 4th, and then about a week later for science. And in elementary, what we need to do is, obviously our job is to cover the grade level standards, teach them well so students are learning. And so from a teaching and learning perspective, when we do a pre-Labor Day start, we have more days of instruction before we assess the standards. And we, in a scope and sequence in any grade level, given grade level, elementary, and I'm not speaking for secondary here because, again, my expertise is elementary, but we end up changing the curriculum, the scope and sequence to make sure we have covered all the standards before we assess the kids with the MCA, which is the standards. And so that has helped us, and Kathy shared some of the growth of what we've seen as a district in greater growth than the level of the state growth. And so part of it is, well, we have more days of instruction. The other thing from a teacher perspective and student perspective is once we give the reading and math MCA test, with the pre-Labor Day start, once kids are done with the MCA test, they have 11 days of school left. So that's when in 5th grade we're doing our experiential camps with Scott Hanna, doing the kayaking, some great things. But the learning changes a bit. So again, that's 11 days after the MCA, the drop dead last date that you can do the MCA test, we have 11 days left of school. With the post-Labor Day start, we have 17 days left of school. And you'll even hear teachers, well, what am I supposed to teach? We've taught all the standards, and so it's prepping them, doing other things. But, you know, as a teaching and learning representative here, if we want truly impactful teaching and learning, that means we're teaching to the standards, the expectations from the state that we work for, and that we prove our students are learning the standards by the assessments we give. And again, that just gives us more time to ensure that students are learning all the standards. And so that's just my elementary perspective on that.
Questions or comments?
So the MCA window opens the first week in March. We've been able to, due to Chromebook access and other options, we've been able to move, and this all has to be posted before school starts. We've been able to move MCAs starting the 26th of March. And we go pretty solid through the 4th of May. AP exams, I also had that question. AP exams really run up to the last 2 weeks of school for our students, so for this year. So the last AP exam for those in AP English Language and AP Macro are on the 16th of May. And again, we don't set those dates. College Board sets those dates.
I apologize if you already mentioned this, but there's MAP testing. Did you mention
We
that,
don't
or the
give MAP testing.
Or the NWEA or?
We don't give MAP, we don't
You're
do
not-
that testing.
Oh, okay.
We do fast testing.
Okay, when is that?
So Mary-
To do FAST. FAST is done 3 times a year, so we can start anywhere from the first day of school, which obviously teachers aren't testing the first day of school, but up through the first 2.5 weeks of school. I don't have this year's calendar right in front of me. I have the proposals. Then, again, we'll fast test the week before. And again, it's a window open. So we tell teachers, here's when the window is open, along with the building principals. You decide what best meets, whether you're sharing Chromebook cards, computer labs, because the fast test is a computer-based test. So buildings have discretion. We just open the window here to say within when the national norms are. So FAST, which was developed out of the University of Minnesota, gives us the date to say, here are the dates that when your kids test, we can national norm if you're in these periods. So that's at the district, we say we want the national norms, so we open up during the national norming period. And so for FAST, it's a week before Christmas and 2 weeks into January. And then beginning of May through the end of May, I believe. So I can get the exact dates if you want next time. Sorry, I didn't think you'd ask that. The FAST is a quick test, by the way, too. For reading, takes about 15, 20 minutes. Grades K through 7, and then math about the same.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have one other clarification, I think. If both of the calendars proposed indicate 173 secondary days, and we agreed last year to have 174, and I believe that is a result of the fact that this is one of those unique years where we are hosting the Big Nine Music Festival.
Yes.
And that makes sense. My question is, as I recall, back in ancient times when I was in the classroom and we had Big Nine Music Festival in Albert Lea, didn't we close more than just the high school? Are we only closing the senior high, grades 8 to 12 on that day? So Southwest will be in session, so that facility will not be used, because as I recall, it was.
It will not be used. Only the high school facility and then an outside church for the choir.
Okay, so K through 7 will be in session on that day then, okay.
I think that was back in ancient times when there was Central High School and
Yeah,
there
we
was-
didn't have the new,
There was no new high school.
Just wondering.
Okay. This is an action item. What are the wishes of the board?
Mr. Chairman, in order to move this process along and facilitate discussion, I would like to move that we adopt the post-Labor Day calendar. And then I would like to speak to that motion.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Discussion.
Thank you. First of all, as I've said many times, I seriously believe that on the list of all those factors that contribute to quality education when we start the school year is not very high on that list. But it's an item that a lot of people are very passionate about and promotes an awful lot of discussion in the community. And as I have canvassed the community rather unscientifically and informally over the last week or so, it's not unanimous in either direction where the people that I'm talking to are coming from. But I would have to say that the majority of them favor the post-Labor Day start. And so the reason for my motion is that I feel obligated to represent those people that have that opinion. And the reasons cited, a lot of people feel that we are shortchanging our students on their summers. And specifically, and I would have to agree with this particular aspect, many of our students have summer jobs, and those summer jobs are still going fairly significantly in the middle of August, and now they have to terminate those jobs. One outstanding example of that is a swimming pool. As a result of the fact that we are starting a couple of weeks earlier, the swimming pool is closed in the middle of August, and that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because that's one of the hottest months of the year. I know and I respect the opinion of a lot of people who are in favor of the pre-Labor Day start, especially the administration and people in the high school. I have been in the high school, as most of you know, for quite a while, and I just don't see the advantages that so many people are so adamant about in terms of, for example, finishing the first semester before Christmas break. I've been there many times, and I didn't see it as an issue. In fact, I saw some advantages to having a little bit of a break before people came back and finished the semester. Another reason which I have encountered, and it was brought up by one of the speaker today, we justify starting before Labor Day on the basis of construction projects, and I think we're stretching that one a little bit. Not that I'm opposed to stretching things that border on violating state mandates, but I think this time maybe the mandate makes a little sense. So I'm a little concerned about that too. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Other discussion?
I guess just to start, so is that correct? Are we, would we be doing this under construction mandate or a waiver? I thought there was a different state law that we were using for this opportunity. Whoever would like to answer.
As I understand it,
We're using the waiver.
yeah, it has nothing to do with $400,000.
We're using the $400,000 waiver. Yes, that's what we're doing.
It is, okay,
Yep.
I was thinking
Yeah,
it
and
wasn't.
as I understand it, the spirit of that waiver is that if you have some major construction project coming up, you anticipate that, and then the year prior to that, have a pre-Labor Day start so that school can be out early in the summer, and then the next year, you go back to the post-Labor Day start, and that expands the length of the summer to accommodate that building project.
That's accurate, and the other option the board always has available is to go through the 3-hearing process and do the extended school year early start that way, which is also available. But due to the expedited nature of the community wanting to know early, this is the most simple way to get it done, and it's the same tool we utilized last year.
Thank you. In that case, I do not agree with using the construction waiver for the same reasons that Mr. Score was sharing. When we first talked about changing the calendar a few years ago, some of the reasons for the proposed change would be to improve test scores and for less stress at the high school during finals, since their finals would be completed before the break. I've received a lot of input as well, and I guess I was surprised, as you know, Mr. Chair, that we hadn't asked for community input at all, that it just kind of appeared tonight with kind of short notice that there would be action.
I think we did talk about it 3 meetings ago that we were gonna
Yeah.
vote, and so that was,
Right, and I know, but I guess I was thinking that we would be having an article in the paper or something, but I know a few of us got words out informally about it, so, but I've received input throughout the year as well. Some of the input I've received is that the early start is okay, we like it for our family or our business. Most of the input I've received is it's not okay, we don't like it for our family or our business, and to me, those are kind of personal preference, whether we like it or dislike it, they both seem to be working. So setting aside whether someone likes or dislikes it because of preference, other things I've thought about, one of them would include about students transferring in, expecting a traditional school year, they would need to catch up or perhaps choose another district instead of us. And if we look at some of the facts that we've been presented, and I know we were presented more test scores tonight, but overall in our other presentation, they didn't look like test scores had improved, rather many had dropped. And I don't know that finishing finals before the break is less stressful for all students. I know that for some students who work during the summer and during the school year or have other busy parts of their lives, they do like to have that break to prepare for finals. And when it comes to anxiety, I guess, among our students, I have the feeling that Mr. Score had about education, that there are a lot of ways to approach those kind of things, and moving a final, I don't think is a major approach to lowering anxiety for our students. And I agree about the education comment as well. Many of our students are hardworking middle or lower class students who work during the summer and often during the school year. And I believe we are creating problems for those students because we're putting more stress on them by shortening the work time that they can have during the summer and potentially forcing them to work more during the school year. And also, it's a little bit of a contradiction for me because we're focused on providing workers to our community, and here we are removing workers from our community in a time where they can really be useful. There are a lot of other factors that come into play, but as we know, the state fair involved people presented to us at a previous meeting about the problems that they would encounter, and I just do not feel that the costs to our students and community outweigh the benefits that may be provided by an earlier start. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of some of what Jill and Neil said, so I'll try not to reiterate everything that they said. I too agree that what we're doing is not the intent of the statute. Probably we can get by with it, clearly we have, but it's not the intent. And then regarding MCA scores, I never liked the idea of starting early to try to raise MCA scores. It seemed to me like gaming the system. You know, all the other ones start at a certain time, maybe like a coach allowing, his players to start practice earlier than everybody else. We're compared to other districts in Minnesota who have a post-Labor Day start. So it always seemed to me like gaming the system anyhow, but like Jill said, they didn't really go up anyway. And if the MCA scores were going to go up, this would be the year it would have, because not only do we have the more in-seat days before this MCA time, because we started earlier, last summer we, in addition, had a shorter summer. So this would be the year that they would rise the most, you would think, you would expect. Also, I agree that I just like that most Minnesota schools, we're never going to have exact same calendars every school district. We all have different school boards, we all have different teacher contracts, et cetera, but it's nice to be close. And especially, you know, I work in the SMET Consortium, I work in Southland, and we have a whole bunch of level 3 programs that students travel from different districts to come to those. And so we've tried within the SMET Consortium to get most of those districts as close as possible, because, you know, they'll have siblings. One sibling will go to Lyle, and one is going to Adams. They want to have those calendars as close as possible. Never been able to get them perfect, and that will never happen. But it'd be nice to have our calendar pretty close to Austin's, because we're in a co-op with them. So one of the siblings in that family might be going to the level 4 program in Austin, and their sibling is going to school here, or their siblings are going to school here. I know our calendars are never going to be exact, but starting 2 weeks early or starting before Labor Day is going to have them even further apart. And so then that family time in the summer is even shortened. As it always, and I know that's a small, very small subset of our population. I know it is, but it's just one more factor to consider. And on to that is, there's a lot of people, a lot of parents who work in different school districts. And this affects their time with their child. Like for me, and this isn't about me, but my summer was shorter with my child because my schedule is different. Like his summer's not shorter, my summer's not shorter, but the summer with their child is shorter. And there's a lot of people who do work in different school districts as teachers, as paraprofessionals, or in different capacities. Also, another factor is kind of why I asked about the testing in the spring a little bit, and thanks for sharing that. That was good information. I don't know how much this is true, but I heard from some people that with this calendar ending sooner in the spring, testing was just smushed together a little bit more. That seemed like there's a little bit of pressure to get it all in, and you know, at the end of the school year, there's just a lot of testing going on. And then also, of course, affecting summer pool closing early, et cetera. And then one other thing. One of the comments, because I reached out, like I agree with Jill, this wasn't, we did agree that we were going to vote on this, and I tried to get the word out. I got it out on Facebook and stuff, because I tried to get the word out so people know, and they can start getting their comments into me and to everyone else. And I hope that other people are doing that as well, but I think it'd be nicer if we got that input out. But one of the comments I got is, why do we keep addressing this year after year? I think people are kind of sick of addressing this year after year. There, you know, and like Jill said, she hears some things that are preferences for it, some preferences against it. A couple of people who liked it, you know, this is an interesting thing I never thought of, is they like to go on vacation in May, and usually the deals are in May. You know, there's different preferences all over and different reasons and things, but I think the bigger reasons and you know, more people dislike starting before Labor Day, and it just puts us different than most every other school in the state of Minnesota.
Other comments?
Oh, I appreciate those comments, and I can just say, and I realize there's some selection bias about who contacts whom, but the overwhelming majority of people that contacted me the past 3 weeks have been for the pre-start, for some of the opposite reasons that were just stated, that their children still have a 12-week summer, that they didn't have trouble finding jobs, that they're ready to go back, that the teachers wanted them to come back, and so I'd agree we haven't seen any change in the test scores, and I could live with either calendar, but if I'm going to represent the vast majority of people that contacted me, that would be to vote for the pre-start.
Yeah, I definitely, not just over the last 3 or 4 weeks, talked probably over the last 3 or 4 months, just different people about different things, and I know some of the comments that I've heard even from a couple specific teachers was, if you would have asked me here 6 weeks after we started the early start, I might have had a different comment than I do now, but they really like the shortened amount of days left after the testing, because they felt like they really had to push to cover all their material. And once they got it done, it's not what do we do, but what kind of interesting things can we do to make the kids more ready for next year. There are definite positives and negatives to both. Overwhelmingly, again, as Dr. Schode said, I had more people that were in favor of the early start. Maybe that's because they've gotten used to it now too, and maybe that's not the way to look at it, but I really do like the option of more contact, student, teacher contact days. 8, I guess, would be the specific number here compared to with the post-Labor Day start.
Can I make one more comment? I know that you're going to have your own too, but I'm glad that Angie had mentioned the inflated growth point. That has always been something that has bothered me as well. That when I, as a board member, express value for growth, for me it is, I don't want that growth to be at any cost. I don't want it to be, to me it's an inflated growth. Just moving more days before the testing and say that we had growth, I don't know that that's an equal comparison. I'd rather have a more true comparison of growth, not just moving it ahead from the majority of the state or what we've had before. And I guess what puzzles me and seems like a missed opportunity here in either calendar is to maximize the post-MCA learning. I don't really understand why. I can understand why we've already taught all the pieces that are there for the MCA, but I don't understand why we're having a difficulty filling in the extra 2 or 4 weeks of meaningful learning. And I guess, to me, that seems like a missed opportunity for either calendar. Thank you.
Any comments from our student board members?
For me, I'm deeply involved in 4-H, and so the state fair is a pretty big deal to everybody I'm around in that group. I know that that's a rather minority, but we do have an agriculturally based town here, so that is something to think about, I think. But overall, for the students that I've talked about, from their point of view, the finals ending before Christmas break does seem to be a big deal for them. They really like it because they know that over that time they have it to relax, and that when they get back after all the days off, they won't have to restart over and do the learning process again. So a lot of the students I've talked to have liked the after Labor Day start.
You mean pre?
Pre.
Is it on? Okay. I also know a bunch of people that are in 4-H, but it didn't really seem to make a difference on the days they missed, because I know a lot of people that are in sports. For soccer, I'd miss 2 or 3 hours a day. For figure skating, sometimes I miss Thursday and Friday before if I'm in a competition. So the missing the days isn't really a problem, I think. We missed 3 days. 3 days. And I really like doing all of the finals before Christmas break, because honestly, when you're on break for 2 weeks, it's kind of like I forgot what I did today in math. Like, I couldn't tell you, because it is, it's really challenging, and unless someone's there to remind me, like, you do have homework, then it is a struggle to remember. And a lot of it, at a certain point, it's not something you can just look over once and remember how to do it. It is a lot of, you have to repeatedly do it. And so I like having the finals done, and I think it helped a lot with my stress, I think. And I have a couple jobs in the summer, and I ref. That begins in May, ends in June or early July. Gigi refs with me. We get a bunch of games at night, and it's no problem. Then I work at the pool, and we left when all the college students left as well. So that's nice. I have a brother in college. So when he's on home from break, normally I can see him, where before it was just a lot of difference. But it didn't seem to affect the pool as much. So.
Okay, thank you. You know, as I look at this decision, we never used to make this when I was on the board the first time, but it seems to be before us. And as I look at it, I see that there's pros and cons on both sides. And I know that the board has their heart into this, and they're trying to make the best decision. Because we all want to do what's best for kids. As I look at our board, we have just one of us that has a student in the school system, and I think the rest of, and not, Angie, this is not, I don't want to take anything away from you, because I know your heart's into it too, but I think we all want to do what's best for kids. As when I ran for election, and even through the year, I've asked people, what do they think of the calendar through the summer, and so I've gotten feedback, and I would say it's gone both ways. I look at the construction waiver, and I say to myself, what do I think is right? I don't think that the state always does what's right, or the government always does what's right. And so I don't worry about the waiver, and I look at start dates in other states. My kids in Denver start August 9th. I know Iowa is right to the south of us, and they start just, I think they start just slightly before us. And so I'm not sure there's a right start date. So it's, you know, you could flip a coin, but we do have to make a decision. And so my thoughts on what's best for kids, and I base this mainly on the end of the testing in the spring. I feel that the pre-Labor Day start is best, and that's just my gut feel. But that's where I'm looking at things right now at this time. I don't think that we're shortening the summer. We're just changing the date that it starts and ends.
Thank you. I started this discussion, and I'll end it, I hope. It's an issue that the public and the people here are divided on. And it's, as I said, it's something that people tend to get passionate about. My hope is that we can overcome that passion, and we will make a decision tonight, and whatever that decision is, I would hope that everybody would accept it. And it, as I said, it really doesn't make all that much difference when we start school. If I may be so obnoxious as to make another literary quotation, it was Alexander Pope who said about government, "For forms of government, let fools contest whatever is best administered is best." And we're not talking about forms of government, we're talking about when we start school. And I think the principle is pretty much the same. It's how well students want to learn and how well staff is engaged in teaching them. That's what determines how well we do in educating those students. So I would hope that we will make a decision, and I hope that everybody would abide by it amicably.
Okay, good point.
I agree with what Neil said. Whatever whatever is approved, I think that we all need to support that. And I also wanted to piggyback on something Jill said as a teacher. She said that, well, gosh, I hope that after MCAs there is a whole bunch of learning. It shouldn't just stop. It doesn't. You know, we take our MCAs and we just keep on going, and I can't imagine that the teachers here would do anything different. I know talking to Neil before, he's all worried about cramming all the knowledge into the students' heads. So I don't think it does stop after MCAs. That's just a point in time. I really wouldn't believe that any teacher would just stop instructing.
Agree. I think that, you know, unfortunately, we get caught into teaching to the tests, and there's a lot of other teaching that can be done there. So if everyone's okay, we'll call the question then, and maybe we should do a roll call vote so that make sure that we get it correct. So it's either a yes or a no on the motion, and the motion is to adopt the post-Labor Day calendar. So Neil, since you made the motion, I'll start with you. Yes. Jill?
No.
No? No.
Yes.
Okay, we have a 3-3 tie. So I guess we'll open it up again.
Well, if no one else, will I move we adopt the pre-Labor Day calendar.
Is there a second to that motion? Second. Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, we'll do the roll call vote again, and this time I'm gonna start on the right-hand side. Angie? So it's a,
This is for the pre-Labor Day calendar, so no.
yes.
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 Motion carries. Okay, next we have scheduled a recess to adjourn to the Hammerfield Complex. I would entertain a motion to do so.
So move.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion?
Is that the training room, the 50-yard line?
Park, you know where the field house is,
Oh, so behind the